Endocrine system, hormones. This is an introductory session on hormones. Nervous and endocrine systems act together to coordinate functions of all our body systems. They function in different ways. The nervous system acts through nerve impulses. Sensory nerves receives information from the surroundings, produce impulses in response to the information or stimulus, which are sent to the central nervous system, the brain, and where they are processed and the instructions are sent to the different effector organs through nerves. The nerve impulse or the nerve messages are transmitted by electric current in between neurons. From one neuron to the next neuron, the transmission is by the use of neurotransmitters. The responses produced by the nervous system are faster, but for a shorter duration. They act on specific target organs. Endocrine system, on the other hand, exerts their influence through hormones, chemical messengers secreted by specific cells or collection of specific cells organized in the form of a gland. These hormones are mediator molecules released in one part of the body into the blood and reaches the different parts of the body through blood and regulates the activity of cells in remote areas of the body. They produce slower responses, but the effects last longer than the nervous system, and it has a broader influence. The main endocrine glands of the body includes hypothalamus, pituitary gland, pineal gland, thyroid gland, thymus, adrenal gland, testis in man, and uterus and ovary in females. Hormones are specific. They act on specific type of cells or tissues. They affect only specific target tissues with specific receptors. Hormone specificity is due to the receptors present on the cell membrane or in the cytoplasmic organelles. Receptors are constantly synthesized and broken down. The number of receptors could be upregulated or down-regulated. Depending upon the upregulation or down-regulation, the hormonal action can be increased or decreased. Hormone types. The hormones get circulated in the blood. Their action might be on the same cell which secrete them or on other cells. Local hormones act locally. The hormonal action could be paracrine or autocrine. In the paracrine action, they act on neighboring cells. Certain types of cells secrete these hormones, but the action will be on other cells which are near to the secretory cells. Autocrine, the hormones act on the cell itself. Their action is on the cell which produces them. And chemical nature of hormones. The hormones could be lipid soluble or water soluble. Lipid soluble hormones generally are of lipid in nature or steroidal in nature. Nitric oxide is another lipid soluble hormone. These lipid soluble hormones need transport proteins for their transport in the cell. They will not be traveling across the body freely or independently of other materials. They need transport proteins. Water-soluble hormones, on the other hand, circulate free in the blood. They include amines, peptides or proteins, eicosanoids. Polypeptide hormones include insulin, glucagon, somatotropin, follicle-stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, vasopressin, oxytocin, thyrotropin, and adrenocorticotropic hormone. Steroid hormones include estrogen, testosterone, cortisol, aldosterone, corticosterone, progesterone. Whereas amino acid derivatives include epinephrine and norepinephrine, dopamine, thyroxine T3 and T4, melatonin, serotonin, etc. Mechanism of action of hormone. The hormone response. The response of cells or tissues to hormone depends on both hormone as well as on the target cell. Lipid-soluble hormones bind to receptors inside the target cell, whereas water-soluble hormones bind to receptors on the surface of the cell. So the lipid-soluble hormones need to enter into the cytoplasm for exerting their influence. So they bind to the receptors present inside the cytoplasm. Some receptors are even present bound to the DNA molecule. As a result, the hormones need to enter into the nucleus for exerting their influence. These hormones exert their influence by controlling the transcription of specific genes. As a result, mRNA molecules are produced which induce the production or the synthesis of specific proteins which are needed for exerting the physiological effect. Water-soluble hormones bind to receptors on the plasma membrane. They activate second messenger system. This helps in the amplification of the small signal, or the small amount of hormone is enough to produce a required influence. The responsiveness of the target cell depends on concentration of hormones and the abundance of target cell receptors. The higher the concentration, the response will be higher. The higher the number of target receptors, the response will be higher. And also the affinity of the target receptors vary. The higher the affinity, more binding and more action. The influence exerted by other hormones are also controlling the effect of a particular hormone. These influence can be permissive. The presence of one hormone is needed for the functioning of another hormone. It could be synergistic. Presence of one hormone increase the or enhance the action of another hormone. And antagonistic. One hormone suppressing, reducing the action of another hormone. So this is a picture showing the action of water-soluble hormones. The receptors are present on the cell surface. The hormones are secreted in the blood, and the blood carries the hormones to different parts of the body. From the blood capillaries, hormone escape into the intercellular space. The hormone reach the receptor and bind with it. The binding of the hormone to the receptor activates the G protein attached to it. This will cause the activation of adenylate cyclase enzyme, which convert ATP into cyclic AMP. The cyclic AMP activates protein kinases. These protein kinases phosphorylate the target proteins. The phosphorylated target protein exerts the physiological influence. This is how hormones act. The lipid-soluble hormones also act in a similar way, but they need to reach inside the cell as their receptors are present inside the cell. The hormone action is controlled by nervous system as well as other hormones, and also chemical changes in the blood control hormonal action. Most hormonal action is regulated by negative feedback. There are examples of positive feedback also in the control of hormones. So this is a short summary of hormonal action. Hormones are chemical messengers secreted by certain cells secreted by certain cells at certain part of the body. They get circulated in the blood. They reach the target cell, bind to receptors, and these receptors are present on the cell surface or cell membrane or inside the cell. The receptors which are engaged depending upon the chemical nature of the hormone. Water-soluble hormones bind to the receptors on the cell surface, whereas lipid-soluble hormones enter inside the cells and bind the receptors inside the cytoplasm or nucleus. Second messengers are involved in the action of water-soluble hormones. This helps in the magnification or enhancement of the hormonal influence. As a result, a small amount of hormone is enough to exert considerable amount of physiological response. The hormone actions are also controlled by nervous system and other hormones. Chemical changes in the blood also controls the hormonal action. Most of the time, hormonal action is controlled by negative feedback. There are certain examples of positive feedback also in the control of hormonal action. Thank you.